Have you ever wanted to retain more of what you read? To be able to converse meaningfully about a book you read a year or 2 years or even 10 years later? Or maybe you've been wanting to read more critically, to pick up on subtle themes and connections in the text, to formulate nuanced opinions on the subject matter. Or perhaps you've been wishing you could remember that one meaningful quote from a novel you read at a pivotal moment in your life, to be inspired yet again by the words that touched you so deeply back then. If so, you've come to the right place. Annotating as you read can help you achieve all of these goals, and in this video, I'm going to show you how. Why I annotate and why you might want to as well. Reading isn't just about skimming your eyes across a page, picking up on the broadest strokes of a story, picking up on plot points and character names and places as a passive observer, and forgetting them again almost immediately. Reading is about letting a story in, absorbing the text so deeply that it stokes your imagination, inspires you, and even changes you. This is why I annotate. To be an active participant in a conversation that an author started by writing a book. To meet them halfway by engaging with the text. There are a plethora of reasons you might want to annotate as you read. Here are just a few of them. To remember details for reviews or journal entries, to come up with discussion questions or insights for a book club, to read more critically, to remember your favorite moments and quotes, to highlight points of contention you might have with the book, to track how often a certain trope or theme or concept pops up throughout the text, to stay on top of complicated world building, to track clues in a mystery, to learn new vocabulary, to be able to get a clear picture of a book without fully rereading it, to have a more immersive experience, to be more engaged as you're reading. Turning a simple stack of paper bound at one end into something sentimental and unique to you. These are just some of the reasons that I love to annotate as I read, and I hope at least one of them resonated with you. Now that I've hopefully convinced you as to the benefits that come along with annotating as you read, I want to talk about tools. Because not only am I a bookworm, but I'm also a stationery nerd. But before I do that, I want to take a minute to talk to you about this video's sponsor, Native. I've been using Native deodorant for years, and I am their biggest fan. Not only are Native deodorants vegan and cruelty-free, which is so important to me, but they also work and smell great. They have really unique scents, and I'm constantly finding new scents that I want to try. My 3 most recent scents are vanilla and sandalwood, which smells heavenly. It's like baked goods in a cottage. Sea salt and cedar, which is like salt air from the coast blowing into a forest. And wildwood and cardamom, which has a really invigorating herbal kind of scent. I also love that Native provides up to 72 hours of odor protection. Native uses clean, simple, and effective ingredients you already know and love, like coconut oil and shea butter. They're aluminum and paraben-free, and vegan and cruelty-free. I love them all, but if I had to pick just one favorite, I think it would have to be sea salt and cedar. This scent is so great for day-to-day. It's very neutral, but it smells amazing, and I feel like it's perfect for the summertime. If these kinds of scents aren't really your thing, don't worry. Native has so many scents to choose from. Whatever your favorite scent is, they probably already have it, or it'll show up in their limited edition scents, which they're launching all the time. Native deodorant has an amazing texture. It's not sticky, and it feels dry when you're applying it, so you don't have to walk around with your arms up trying to get rid of that wet deodorant feeling. No one likes that. I'm so excited to try Native's new limited edition Fall Escape collection, perfect for crafting your own autumnal moment, featuring vanilla and cactus flower, desert grass and sandalwood, honey and cigarro, and sage and sweet citrus, for scents that are a little more unexpected for fall, pulling from the southwest autumn. 3 deodorants would normally cost $39, but if you use my link and code PLANTBB2, you can get them for just $27. That's over 33% off. Thank you so much to Native for sponsoring this video. Starting with the basics, tabs, a highlighter, and a pen are really the trifecta of annotating. My absolute favorite tabs are these. I love the darker, more desaturated color palette. It's very much up my alley, though I do have other tabs that I'll use on occasion if I feel they match the cover or the feeling of a book better. I'll be linking these tabs along with all the supplies I'm talking about in the description box, so check that out if you're looking for links. But of course, you don't have to use the same tabs I do. You can use whatever you like. As for pens, my favorite is the Pentel Hybrid Technica with a really fine nib. These are 03 nibs. These are technically gel pens, but because the nib is so fine, they really don't expel that much ink. So I find not only do they not bleed through the page or even ghost very much unless it's very thin paper, they also write super smoothly, which you would expect from a gel pen, without smudging really easily. I find I only really have to wait a couple seconds before turning the page to make sure that it doesn't smudge or transfer anywhere, and I personally prefer a finer nib so I can write nice and small, since there's not usually a lot of extra space in the margins or in and around the text in a book to write. Something finer always works for me. Some people like to use pens in different colors. I personally prefer a little bit more of a muted color palette in general, something a little simpler, so I like to stick with black 99% of the time. Don't worry, we'll touch on the 1% later. As for highlighters, I am a Tombow stan. I've been using this specific shade as my highlighter for years, and it is supreme. If you, like me, prefer something a little subtler in terms of highlighter, not necessarily a fan of neon shades or darker shades that can sometimes obscure the text, I highly recommend you check out the Tombow in 990. It's the perfect subtle beige shade. It's light enough that you never have to worry about not being able to read the text underneath, but it is dark enough to show up on slightly darker cream-toned papers. And of course, it has dual tips, the nice brush tip, which I use for traditional highlighting, and the finer tip, which you can use to underline or even write short notes if you like. This is my holy grail highlighter. It doesn't bleed through the page, it doesn't ghost, it is perfection. Of course, if you want a little bit more variety, if you want to have different colors to use for different things, or even just prefer something else over beige, they have light sort of pastel versions of pretty much every color you could imagine, including more neutrals, so check them out if you're looking for a great highlighter. Those are my favorites of the absolute basics: tabs, pens, and highlighters. There are more supplies that I'm going to mention in this video, but I'm going to sprinkle them in as I talk about different ways to annotate, including options for those who are a bit squeamish about writing in their books. So keep watching. My favorite way to keep all my supplies on hand when I'm reading from home is to put everything in a little reading caddy. This is something I picked up at a vintage store and I'm obsessed with it. And it's the perfect size to hold my tabs, pencil case with basics like pens and highlighters, and 4 to 5 books that I'm in the midst of reading. I usually place it right beside my favorite reading chair so it's ready to go, but it's portable, so if I want to go read outside or read somewhere else in the house, I can just bring my little cart with me and now I have all my supplies. When I'm away from home, whether I'm going to the park or a coffee shop to read, or maybe I'm on vacation or on a trip, I've been using this little bag from Archer and Olive. It's vegan leather. I originally bought this as a notebook cover to hold my bullet journal and any supplies I needed when I was out of the house, but I discovered it was perfect for holding my current read and all my annotating supplies, so it's been co-opted. Here you can see an example with Fourth Wing in there, which is a pretty big hardcover book. If you're reading paperbacks, you could definitely fit at least 2 in there. There's a pocket here for my sticky notes and for tabs if I need any extra, and of course the pen loops, which are perfect for my Sharpies, pens, and highlighters. I love that everything is nice and secure in here instead of just being loose in my bag. Of course, you don't need a dedicated bag to hold all of your things. You can have just a little pencil case, or just toss a pen and a highlighter into your bag along with your book. My little caddy that I keep at home and my travel bag help so much with keeping everything organized. What about taking notes? Now in this video, I'm not going to touch too much on how I take notes as I read, because for me, that's a little different from annotating. Briefly, for those who are curious, I use Notion to track my reading, my stats, and also to take notes as I read and to write my reviews, so I have everything in one place. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in a future video covering my Notion setup and how I use it. I also have a reading journal, which I like to fill in at the end of each month. You can check out my reading journal playlist if you want to see the kinds of things that are in my reading journal. It's a bit more about remembering books afterwards, sort of finalizing my thoughts, having something for myself that can contain everything I read in a year. It's also a way for me to track stats and goals, and a way for me to celebrate some of my favorite books. So now that I've covered all the basics, I want to get into the 3 levels of annotating. Level 1, which is annotating without commitment. This is non-permanent annotation. Level 2 is quick and easy annotation. This is the most basic annotation you might think of when you think about annotating a book. And then we have level 3, pro level annotating. This level has all the bells and whistles to get the absolute most out of reading. Let's start with level 1, annotating. This is annotation without commitment for the squeamish among you who aren't ready to permanently permanently alter your book. This is also great for when you have a special edition of a book, or maybe a beautiful vintage edition, or even library books. The most basic version of annotating you can possibly do is just using tabs. Tabs are not permanent, so you can always remove them after you're done reading. The most basic version of tabbing as you read is just marking everything and anything that catches your eye without using a key. This is how I started my annotation journey, and it was really the gateway to more complex annotating. Some examples like that would be The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I just tabbed anything and everything that caught my eye without using a specific key. This is really simple. It has a really low barrier to entry. It's very easy to start annotating this way, and it really doesn't take a huge amount of effort, so it's great for beginners. One thing I will say is that it definitely has less benefits. For example, when I look at this, I have no idea what any of these tabs are referring to. Not only did I not write in the book, so nothing is highlighted or underlined, there are no notes. So when I look at a tab, I don't necessarily know exactly why I was tabbing it, but on top of that, I don't even know the general reason why I might have been tabbing it, like I would if I had a key. In this case, dark red doesn't mean anything, so I really don't know what I'm tabbing here, whereas if I was using a key and had assigned dark red to character development, for example, I would have a much clearer idea of what I was tabbing, even if I wasn't highlighting and writing in the book. And that is why I really recommend adding one extra element to this, which is using a key along with your tabbing. Your key doesn't have to be complex. You don't even have to assign something to every single color. You could even just pick 3 or 4 colors to start. But having some basic categories for the colors, things like quotes, character development, world building, prominent themes in the book. This is really going to take your annotations up to the next level. My key changes for every single book I read because every book I read is different. I don't have a set key that I use for everything. I don't use the same colors every time. There are some things that pretty much always exist within my tabbing key, for example, tracking quotes, but everything else pretty much is up in the air. I'll share a couple examples of keys from books that I've read recently. For example, Parable of the Sower. Here I have character development, world building, important plot points, favorite quotes, foreshadowing, book club questions, musings on God and religion, and Octavia Butler predicting the future. Another example, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is nonfiction. Here my tabs were quotes, resonates with me, further research, points for discussion, and interesting ideas. Yet another example, a mystery, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. For this book, my key was a little different. I have facts of the case, clues, the victim, suspects, where, so anything to do with location, and quotes. Another fiction example, 100 Years of Solitude. In this book, my key was quotes, problematic or questionable content, discovery or pursuit of knowledge, Colombian history, communism, progress and civilization, memory, solitude, and the cyclical nature of time. Another example, Normal People by Sally Rooney. For this book, I had colors for Marianne and Connell, the 2 main characters. I had one for people being shitty, questionable content, people being nice. That color didn't come up nearly as often. Interesting ideas, and wait, what? That doesn't make sense. So as you can see, your key can look very different depending on the type of book you're reading. It's really up to you what you find value in tracking. For something like fantasy or sci-fi that maybe has more world building, I would definitely recommend having tabs specifically for world building. You might want to have one with information about magic systems if you're reading a fantasy novel. If your book has a lot of characters, you might want to assign different tab colors to different characters, or maybe you just want one in general for character development. If the book you're reading is exploring a lot of complex themes, you might want to have a key that tracks all of those different themes. So for Paradise, for example, which I'm about halfway through, my key is quotes, historical context, and world building. And then we get into some of the themes of the novel that each have their own color, like paradise or utopia, colorism and racism, and patriarchy versus matriarchy. And then some more general ones like important plot points, character development, and foreshadowing. Another nonfiction example, Women, Race, and Class by Angela Y. Davis. For this one, my key is labor, misogynoir, gender roles, family dynamics, and women's rights, first-hand accounts and experiences of slavery, intersection of slavery and oppression of women, and quotes. So hopefully all those examples helped you to get an idea of what kind of key you can make. I typically will start a key with the absolute basics. I might start with a color for quotes and a color for character development, and then as I read, I'll add more and more to my key. When I feel an urge to tab, if it's not because it's a quote or because it's character development, maybe it's touching on a specific specific theme that started to emerge, or maybe it's making commentary on something, I can start to tease out the things that I might want to track with my tabs as I work my way through the first couple chapters. It's also totally okay to change your mind. There have definitely been times that I went back and changed the color of a tab to something else. A great example is The Martian by Andy Weir. The very first tab color that I assigned when I was reading this was world building because it happens on Mars. So I assumed there would be a lot talking about what Mars looked like and felt like, what it was like to be on Mars. And there was basically none. There was very little acknowledgement that our main character was on a different planet, and I ended up crossing it out and changing that color to makes me laugh later on in the book as I started to laugh more because it turned out I didn't need a tab for world building. I also originally had a section for science dumping and a separate section for boring math problems, but later on I decided to combine them into one, just science and math dumping. At the beginning, I was really disliking Mark Watney, so I not only had a section for Mark being annoying, but I also had a section just for ugh. But later on in the book, Mark started growing on me, so I reassigned that color to Mark being likable, because gosh darn it, he did grow on me. That's just an example to show that you can change your mind at any point. You don't have to commit wholeheartedly to a specific color tab if you don't want to, which is another reason why I like to stick with just black pen and one color highlighter, because if I change my mind later on, if something I thought was going to be a really prominent theme ends up being something that barely shows up, I might decide to reassign that color to something else and remove those tabs, or maybe kind of group those with something else instead of having a separate color for them. And if I'm writing in a different color pen and highlighting in a different color on top of using a specific color tab, it makes it much harder to make those changes later on. Now, if you're on level 1, you still don't want to alter your book permanently in any way, but maybe you want to be able to highlight or underline things, or maybe you want to be able to write your own notes. There are still ways to do that. This is where sticky notes come to the rescue. I personally love the craft paper, but of course, sticky notes come in all shapes and sizes and colors, so let your imagination run free. But the absolute simplest way to still write in your books without permanently altering them is just to write on a sticky note and slap it in there. This is great for adding some of your own thoughts or opinions. There are really endless options, and as long as you go with a sticky note that doesn't have a really super strong adhesive, you don't have to worry about damaging your book in any way. But on top of regular sticky notes, you also have the entire world of clear sticky notes. I recently purchased a bunch of these large transparent sticky notes, and I've been using them in books that I'm not sure I'm gonna love. I don't know if I'm gonna want to keep them on my shelves when I finish, so that I can still highlight and underline and write notes as usual without altering the book. These clear sticky notes are amazing, but something to keep in mind with them is that you can't use regular pens and highlighters. They will smudge, they will transfer, you'll end up with pen and highlighter on the pages on the opposite side. Do not recommend, but you can use permanent markers. So my go-to are Sharpies. I have a fine-tipped Sharpie that I use as my pen. It's a little bit of a thicker line than I prefer, but it's pretty hard to find anything thinner than this ultra fine point in a Sharpie. And I like to use just a regular Sharpie in a nice light beige color. This I got from a skin tone set of Sharpies as my highlighter. It's still light enough to be able to see what's underneath, still a nice neutral color, just like I like it, but both are permanent ink and they dry super quickly. So as long as you give them a couple seconds and just quickly tap the sticky note to make sure that they're dry, you're good to go. You're not going to get any transferring or smudging. Your book is safe. And you can easily remove them, and the pages are completely untouched. Some people like to start with pencil, though I will say, depending on the type of pencil you're using, especially if you're using a very sharp pencil or a mechanical pencil, you might not be able to fully erase your notes without leaving some sort of permanent mark, whether it's an indent or just a little bit of a ghosting of the writing. So that is why I personally prefer to use clear sticky notes and permanent markers instead of a pencil. Moving on to level 2, which is quick and easy annotating. This is for those who want to take it up a notch and start to make a mark on the books they're reading. Literally. If you're feeling hesitant about taking this step, just remember that books are conversation. Authors put their books out into the world because they want people to read them and engage with them. They want us to be really thinking about what they're writing, to love the characters, to be emotionally invested, to be inspired and make connections. I can't think of a single author who would be offended by the idea of a reader being so engaged with their book that they want to highlight and underline and circle and write notes in the margins. It's really the biggest possible compliment to an author's work for a reader to engage on that level. It also makes the book itself so much more special. It's not a book you could find anywhere on a shelf. It's a one-of-a-kind copy of that book that has been influenced by you as an individual, your own thoughts and feelings, your analytical skills, the things that you notice and pick up on, what you find funny or touching or sad or frustrating. It becomes its own new, unique thing, and that is amazing. Of course, if you're on level 2, you're going to be using tabs with a key, and you might be graduating from a simpler key, maybe one that just tracks world building, plot, character development, and quotes, into something more complex like one of the examples I showed, maybe tracking some of the specific themes in the book. You can even use them to track different literary devices if that's something that's of interest to you. Another way to upgrade your tabbing system and make it just a touch more complex is to change around where you're actually placing the tabs on the page. Of course, you have a simple tabbing system where everything exists on the side, but you can also put tabs in different places to mean different things. My go-to method is to generally place tabs along the side, but to put an extra tab on the top for things that I really don't want to forget or absolute favorites. So here you can see there's some pink tabs on the top of my copy of 100 Years of Solitude. For this book, pink indicated quotes, and these are my absolute favorite quotes in the novel, and that makes it really easy to find them instead of having to look through every single pink tab along the side, of which there are many. If you want to get even more complex with it, you can have tabs on the top, on the bottom, even on an angle at the top or bottom to mean different things. Sometimes I will use all of those positions as I'm actually reading, but when I finish, I will rearrange them all to be on the side, except for the couple that are most important at the top, to keep things more simple and to make them easy to slide onto my bookshelf. But again, the options are as endless as your imagination. Once you've arrived at level 2 and you're finally ready to actually write in your book, something I would highly recommend is to make your tab key permanent in your book. That's usually something I do when I finish a book. I will transfer my key from a post-it into the book itself to make sure that they are permanently associated with your copy and you're not going to worry about the post-it falling out and losing the key that opens up the meaning of all of your tabs. And of course, for level 2, you're starting to write and highlight in the actual book itself. And just like anything to do with annotating, this is going to look different for everyone. So personally, what I like to do is to read a couple paragraphs or pages at a time with my highlighter in hand, highlighting anything that catches my eye. Then I like to go back through with my tabs and my pen in hand. When I get to a highlighted section, I'll add the corresponding tab based on whatever it is that I highlighted, and I'll use my pen if I feel the need to underline anything I really want to emphasize. So maybe I highlighted a couple sentences that really stood out to me as a quote, for example. I'll add whatever tab I've assigned to quotes next to it. And if there are a couple words within that quote that really stand out to me that I really want to emphasize, I'll underline them. That's my most basic annotating technique. It also helps me to really retain the material, to not only highlight as I go, but also to go back and skim over that section again as soon as I finished reading it. Now we have finally arrived at level 3, pro level annotating. This is for everyone who wants to take it up a notch, wants to do the most. I recognize you because I am you. Not only are you going to use your tabs, and you're probably going to have a pretty complicated system of tabs. You might be putting tabs in different areas on the page. You'll probably have a key that is very specific to the book you're reading. And of course, you'll also be highlighting and underlining as you read in much the same way as level 2, but again, taking it up a notch. For level 3, not only are you going to be highlighting and underlining, but you also might be circling certain words or phrases. You might be adding asterisks for extra emphasis. At this level, you might also be adding a lot more of your own thoughts in the margins. These notes can look really different depending on the specific book you're reading and what kind of reader you are, but my notes are usually either a short reaction to something, maybe writing out something that a line or paragraph reminded me of, making a connection to either a different part of the novel or maybe a different novel altogether. Maybe I really relate personally to what I'm reading and I write a little bit about something it reminded me of in my own life. You can even write little summaries of your thoughts about a certain section of the book, or maybe at the end of a chapter, you can summarize your thoughts on that chapter. This is a really great way to retain what you're reading, especially if you're reiterating the concepts in your own words. This is a really commonly used technique. It's been studied and proven that it helps us to retain things when we're able to explain them or reiterate them using our own words by paraphrasing. This is the way to connect on the deepest level to what you're reading, to really engage, to be writing your own thoughts, really acting as a conversation partner with the book. The book's not just talking to you, you're talking back. These notes also add the most value if you're rereading a book that you've annotated in the past, because not only can you see the things you highlighted or underlined, the things you tabbed, and you can use your key to be even more certain what you might have been thinking while you were reading, but you can also read back your own thoughts. You can read in black and white or whatever color pen you're using what you thought about a specific event in a book or a certain character or the themes the author was exploring. It's a whole other level of annotating, and it's really so special. I mentioned earlier on that I use a black pen 99% of the time, and now is the time for me to mention the 1%, which is on a reread. I love the idea of writing all my notes in black pen on my first read of any book, but when I reread a book using a different color so that I can separate my thoughts from a first read versus a second read or a third read into infinity. In this way, you can even engage in conversation with yourself. Level 3 is also where you can get a little creative with it if that's up your alley, using different colors or maybe adding doodles or even full-on drawings or sketches or paintings as you read if that's something that enhances the reading experience for you. This is definitely a bonus thing. I'm a pretty artistic, creative person, and even I don't do doodles or draw things or paint things in my books, at least not yet. So don't feel like you have to do that to get the most out of reading. That's really just a bonus. So there you have it. Those are the 3 levels of annotating from beginner to pro to help you get the most out of reading by actively engaging with the text. Let me know which level you're on in the comments down below, and don't be shy to share your favorite tools, tips, techniques, and supplies so all of us can benefit. Remember, there are absolutely no rules, so do what works for you. Reading should, first and foremost, be fun. Thank you again to Native for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in the description box and use my code PLANTBB2 to get your Native starter pack for just $27, which is over 33% off their regular price of $39. Leave some sort of reading or annotating related emoji in the comments down below if you made it all the way to the end, so I know you're a real one. Thank you as always to my patrons for your support. I appreciate you all so much. And with that, I'm going to get going. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.